Welcome to the Being in Medicine Show. I'm Corey Anderson.
And I'm Jeff Mars.
Together, we aim to revolutionize the healthcare experience for patients, clinicians, and all team members by unlocking the transformative power of human potential.
Each week, we explore with you and our guests how embracing our authentic selves and choosing who we are being can affect the nature of healing, leading to profound transformations in our lives and in the lives of those around us.
Join us today on a journey through self-discovery and empowerment as we unlock the human potential within each of us.
Welcome back to the Being in Medicine Show. Today we have an amazing guest, Sundance Robson. Sundance is a transformational facilitator, sound creation artist, contemporary and traditional storyteller. He is dedicated to addressing intergenerational trauma of individuals, communities, and collective systems through a holistic and ceremonial approach. As the founder of Spirit Wealth Collective Corporation, Sundance specializes in guiding individuals, teams, and communities in reconnecting with the source of their experience, personal growth, and self-authentication. He has been invited internationally as a keynote and performer in global leadership collectives. In doing so, Sundance demonstrates pathways that connect into ancestral wisdom. A recognized voice in Indigenous and cross-cultural leadership, Sundance has collaborated with Saskatchewan Justice, legal aid, educational institutions, health and wellness organizations, corporate leadership, and truth and reconciliation-focused initiatives. His approach fuses the ceremonial with the practical, bridging the worlds of ancestral understanding and mastery. Sundance serves from a place of deep commitment to unity and collective awareness. His message is forward-thinking and encompasses healing and transformation at both an individual and global level. Help us welcome Sundance Robson.
Woohoo! Hey, you're Sundance.
Right
Great
on.
to have you here.
Thank you so much for reading that. That sounded wonderful.
Beautiful. That's you. That's
Yeah.
how I experienced you. I had the chance to see you on stage, and wow, just the hairs on the back of my neck go up recalling that experience. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that was very.
Go ahead.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was wonderful being present and listening to the sound and the music. It was a wonderful experience to be a part of from my end.
Absolutely.
Move the room.
Yeah.
Sundance, you said something earlier that really got me interested. Tell us all about White Feather.
White Feather, and Intergenerational Story was the very first title that came to my mind. And for me, my life, I struggled with, albeit trauma, as it seems to be a word that's used a lot in today's day and age. But I didn't know that's what it was. I just felt things happen in certain situations with relationships, within family, within work. And I felt very disorientated, and it was almost like my whole person as a being was collapsing in certain moments.
Mm.
And I wasn't aware that I was experiencing trauma. And so the reason that I came up with White Feather, an Intergenerational Story, is because it tells about a greater narrative that exists in Canada and albeit North America with Indigenous people. And this isn't about pointing fingers so much as it is about creating understanding about what happened on this land. And what was it like? And how do we see it still in some ways continuing to play out in our day-to-day lives? And so this being sort of felt intergenerationally. Now, the essence of White Feather, the symbolic metaphor of the white feather, it's a spiritual significance for me. And in a lot of ways, the spirit is in everything. And you can kind of see I have a drum on my back wall there.
Yeah.
You know, that drum is the spirit disguised as the drum.
Mm.
And the white feather for me is that. It's the spiritual essence. So I was at a place called Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. And I was there with my girlfriend and two of our friends. And my father is buried about 40 minutes east of Winnipeg. And so when we were up there, I told my girlfriend, Karen, I'm going to go to my father's grave. We're booked to go and enjoy a spa later on in the day, but I'm going to wake up early and I'm going to drive out to my dad's grave and I'm going to spend some time there. And it's very beautiful. There's a very significant river in Canada. It's called the Red River, and it flows down into the U.S.
Mm.
And where my father's grave is right on that Red River. And it's a place of significance because it's actually, so where I'm from, my tribe is from, my Indian band as a North American Indian it's called Peguis. It's what it's named after a man named Chief Peguis. And where my father is buried is on the original settlement of the Peguis Reserve. Now, what happened through colonization was all the indigenous people were pushed north, away from that land. And so it's no longer a reserve. There's an old church that's set up on the river and several big oak trees. It's very picturesque. It's absolutely stunning, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
And when I went to my father's graveside, which, you know, I've only been to, I guess that would have been the second time I was there. So I haven't been back since. But I wanted to do something for the nation of Canada. And I didn't know what it was. And when I was sitting there on my father's graveside, an American bald eagle flew right over my head.
Wow.
And I was like, and I just, whoa, like I was caught up in the majestic essence of that moment. And I watched the eagle fly across the river and land in these trees that were on the other side of the river. And I thought, I gotta go get close to that eagle. So I got in my car and I drove over the bridge to the other side of the river and walked down into the trees. And I got close to that eagle, and that eagle just looked at me and then it perched and flew across way to the other side of the river, back to where the graveyard was. So I got in my car and drove back. The eagle was gone. But when I saw that, and I saw the white on the American bald, I thought about white feather.
Yeah.
And I thought about the spiritual significance of what storytelling can do for people. And really, it's, for me, my journey's been moments like this.
Mm-hmm.
Of, you know, when I retreat, like we were on a vacation with our friends, and there was still this calling inside of me. There was this burning desire that was like, the Spirit has some time set aside for me, and it's going to be between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. And you're going to go and you're going to spend some time in the Spirit.
Right.
So to show up with a listening heart, and this podcast is called Being in Medicine, to show up with that listening heart and receive the medicine in that moment. I'll perhaps get the next sort of key or breadcrumb or whatever it is that I need to get me to this next moment. And so when I heard white feather and I thought about my father and the history of these Indian residential schools that were in Canada, where the indigenous people were forced into residential schools, and it has to do with forced assimilation in Canada. Now, this happened on the front end of the 1900s and then sort of phased its way out. But systemically and intergenerationally, we still see the pain of that.
Yeah.
I was the first generation of Indigenous kids that weren't forced into the schools, born in 1980. But I was raised by someone who was.
Right.
And so there's a whole slew of people like me that have this story embedded with them. And there's a lot of Indigenous people in Canada that haven't had help. And my father was one of those people. And he didn't die well. And I lost him to a drug overdose in Vancouver. And so for me, it's important to tell the story because the story holds and provides people a greater context of what they see when they drive through a hood.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I just felt the deep calling to do this. And so since I've curated White Feather, it's gotten a lot of media attention in Canada, and it's now serving in the corporate sector, also within government. And it's helping people that are working on the front line with Indigenous people and also cross-culturally.
Yeah.
It's helping people on the front line, like, for instance, a legal aid lawyer that would have an endless caseload, know that they actually have impact by who they're being when they sit with someone that comes in as a repeat offender.
Right.
And this is an opportunity to make positive change.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting how that came out of me being set aside at my father's graveside.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
What a
You were
brilliant story.
listening. You were listening to the message from the Spirit. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You said earlier that the Spirit is in everything. What does that mean for you?
Well, it means that for me, there isn't any time that I'm not interacting with my understanding of a higher power or God or the substance of the invisible, of whatever it is that you call it. It's very interesting when I think about this drum. I've got some sage in here, but there's a bunch of space here. There's a bunch of space in this frame. And the space in the frame is extremely necessary. The frame needs the space,
right,
to exist. But the space doesn't need the frame to exist.
Well, that's fascinating.
And so for me, when the Spirit is in everything, I'm understanding that the Creator, or Manitou, as they say in Indigenous cultures, the great mystery is in all of that, waiting to be in relationship with us.
That's a beautiful metaphor, and that's a literal truth.
Yeah. I think, as I've gone, life wasn't always like this. I often say my personal development started in a treatment center for drug and alcoholism back in 2006. I just wanted to find a way to stay clean for a day. That was the main objective. The one thing that I really saw was that when two people sit down and have a conversation, there's a value in that. And there's a witnessing of each other in that. And it seems to temper the flame. It seems to temper the heat. And as I would sit with more people, not because I was like working with them, but because I needed help. Like,
Right.
It's Saturday, and I would normally drink at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So what do I do now that I'm sober and I'm living this new life? Well, instead of reaching for a drink, I need to reach for the phone and call someone. And then we would have coffee, and there would be this exchange. There would be this exchange, and then there would be this value that was exchanged through the conversation of talking to someone that had experienced something similar in their life. And it would just, the sensation and the feeling would go. And so I must admit, after I experienced that, I was nearly addicted to something else. And that was coming into conscious contact with more people to understand this.
Wow. When two people come together, it's like there's a third space created that's more than the sum of the two people's parts.
Yeah. Absolutely.
While you're speaking, it looks to me like I can see some white feathers blowing on your background.
That's right.
Speaking to us.
Yes, my beloved, she got that dream catcher for me, and she hung it in my office, which is so cool.
Love that.
Yeah.
Tell us about, we're talking about being in medicine.
Mhm.
What does the term medicine mean for you?
It's like an inoculation. I look at it like that. And what I was just talking about is medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I have something going on inside of me. And I really don't like how it feels. And I need to do something about that because I can't continue to live like this. Now, medicine, for me, addresses that. And so the question then becomes, what form of medicine is it that I am going to ingest? And for me, it's usually spiritual medicine that I'm ingesting. And it has to do with this. It has to do with this.
Head and heart. Yeah.
Yeah. And paying attention to them, because, you know, as I've sat with myself in moments where I found it, I've been challenged by something, or I've wanted to experience some type of a breakthrough, I've noticed that they seem to speak an infinitely different language. There's the language of the head, and then there's the language of the heart. And the head wants to know all these things. The head's like, but what do you mean? And the heart's like, you show up in love and you move and it will move. And the head's like, that won't work. And for me, that is a very important piece to medicine for me, is what will the medicine be that will bring my heart and my head into a greater alignment, so that when I walk with my feet on the ground, I'm walking with them firmly planted, and I know who I am. You know, I know where I am. And I'm seeing the person in front of me in the divine light that I want to see them in.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And you said something earlier that really struck me, and that was receiving the medicine in the moment. Where, you know, we're talking about being in medicine, and each moment through what you just described here, the head and the heart, being in the moment where you open your heart to what's happening in front of you, and you are guided by that greater calling, and you're in every moment. There's medicine in every moment through being with someone and creating that space that we've just all discussed. And I just really loved that when you said that, just being open to receiving the medicine in the moment. because people get really confused that medicine has to be a pill or an elixir or something that we give you physically, but there's medicine just in the space of every moment if you open your heart to it. That's what I heard there. And
Love that.
it was wonderful.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I'm making a life based on that.
Yeah.
I am required to live that way if I want to be successful at my career. And this is the real interesting thing. You know, when I left my job, I was a machinist, a career machinist for, I started in 2002 and worked as a machinist all the way up into 2021 when I left my job. I was a part-time coach in that period of time. I started becoming a part-time coach in 2017. After there was a significant layoff, I realized I actually can't depend on someone else to make me money. I can't depend on the man to pay me. I need to figure out a way to pay myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I had already been doing a lot of work on myself. And that was really where I was like, I'm going to lean into coaching or working with people and spending time with people and helping breakthroughs move along. And sorry, can you remind me where I was going with that?
Well, we were talking
in the
about
moment. We were talking about in the moment. We were talking about in the moment. So one of the things that I realized when I quit my job was that I'm going to be required to live in the moment and work my edge.
Yeah.
I'm going to be required to step to sort of the end here.
Yep.
And figure it out.
Right.
And the prime example of that was probably about a year later, was when I actually went down to my father's gravesite, right? That was one of those moments of where I was like leaning into my faith, leaning into my edge and saying, well, what next? Because it's also important that I might work at in a given area of my craft for a period of time, and I want to evolve. I want to progress into something or into a different sort of mode of being where my core stays the same, but I want to introduce something that will continue to grow and expand me as a person and also the people that I'm working with. And that's what happens in those moments is I proceed to the edge.
Yeah.
And it's a new edge, and your edge has been expanding. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Expand at the edge. Yeah.
It also sounds like the way I hear this, you show up at the edge and you listen and you take the next step and you see where it takes you.
Yeah. You know, alignment is huge. It's alignment and authenticity. I'm hearing a lot about this these days. And for me, it's paramount that alignment is occurring with the authentic nature of my work because there's a deep purpose in that. And that is what keeps me moving, is that there's a purpose. I lived most of my life without one. Or they were all very, I mean, I guess from my term, they were superficial. They were very self-serving.
Driven by the ego.
It was, yeah. I spent, I sing, and as part of the work that I do, and I used the drum, but the whole first part of that story was I played in bands when I was growing up, and for me that became a great outlet, was to play in bands.
Yeah.
I love playing hard rock drums, and the whole idea of becoming this glamorized rock star seemed very appealing to a kid that grew up in alcoholism and went through shelters and didn't have a lot of money. But the whole
sounds exciting.
Yeah. I mean, and trust me, I spent many hours thinking about that and dreaming about that. But there was a self-serving thing. It was, I can't wait to get there so I can leave here. right? There was always that. And when I get there, I'll come back here and I'll just be like, wow, why were you even here? It was almost like I was ashamed of where I'd grown up.
Yeah.
Mm.
Looking for something outside of you to fill that void.
Yeah, for sure. And the band and all that stuff became the illusion at which I created in this facade of, so I do this really well. We ended up finding ourselves finalists for this national band slam competition that we were in, and we were up against another band, and I really thought we had it. I went in early, I listened to the other band, and I thought we're better. But that's just me. I guess I kind of have a bias, but I thought that for myself, right? And I was 21 at the time. I'm 45 now, so it was a few years ago. And halfway through our set, we played our song, which was the single, and I dropped my drumstick. I was so cocky that I didn't even take another pair of drumsticks on the stage. Usually a drummer shows up and they've got a whole bag of sticks that they tie around to the drum. I didn't do that. I just came out with 2 sticks. I never usually drop my sticks. I did then.
Wow.
And my stick went just far enough that I knew that I was going to miss a beat to get it, to retrieve it. So I just was anticipating there was a part in the song coming up where there was a hint of a space, and I needed to get back to the drums real quick because we're moving into a faster part of the song. So I would require both sticks. I did that, but everybody noticed in the band that I had to retrieve the stick, and it threw off the collective sense that we had together when we were working together. And I've heard about your sessions in surgery, about how you all work together, and it's a very profound thing of this. There's a synergy that exists.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so you can just sort of look at everybody and you know what's going on. You don't need to talk. It just happens almost in this silence. And playing in a band is very much similar. But when I dropped my stick, that dropped off. And there was a disorientation and people needed to recalibrate themselves. It only happened in a matter of seconds. All this only happened in a matter of seconds, but it threw us off.
Yeah.
And when they announced the band, the other band won, I watched the other band play. And when I was just hoping something happened. Like, this is so funny how I used to be. I was hoping, man, hopefully he drops the drumstick, or maybe a drum will fall off or something. And maybe, right? Like it'll be, they played a flawless, and they won. And shortly after that, the band that I was in broke up. And that sort of became the falling off point for me earlier on in my life. Was I just ended up falling deeper and deeper into drugs and alcoholism. And the thing was because the very essence of my music and the place that I was creating from a place of lack.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And seeing that so many years later now today, like I said about the space, that infinite space, the frame needs the space, the drum needs the space, but the space doesn't need that. It will exist without it.
Right. Absolutely.
To be able to see that now, that whatever comes and goes in and out of my life, the form, the space will remain.
Right.
The spiritual fabric in which I create from will remain.
Right.
And that is so powerful to know, to live that way from a place of, that's my conviction in life.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
Who you are at your core is just fine. Nothing lacking.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. You used a couple of words that, we do hear these words a lot. And I think it's interesting to hear other people's perspectives of what they mean by these words. And the two that are in my mind right now are authenticity and alignment. Tell us what those mean for you.
How much time do we have?
I'm laughing because 5 years ago I was really being authentic, and I look back now and I think, man, there was some work that was going on there. And
That's a good point, because I think when people are in this space of growth, you said it earlier, right? You get to the edge and then you expand, right? And so we're always, if we're doing the work and we're working in that space, our authenticity will shift and grow as we expand. And so, not to steal your thunder there, sorry, Sundance, but
no, I like that. I like that.
I mean, yeah, continue on. Sorry.
No, absolutely. No apology needed. It helped prompt me. The authenticity has been something that's been this ongoing journey, because when I got clean, I honestly thought that my authentic nature was to be on drugs.
Yeah.
Like, that's where it started.
Right.
And when I saw people partying and I was like driving home past the bars, I was sitting there thinking, my life sucks. Like, I've this is what I've done to myself in my life, that I can't go there.
Yeah.
But it traveled this evolution. I remember this time, and this just came into my mind. I was invited to go to a Tool concert,
Right.
and I said no, and I thought that it wasn't authentic because I wanted to go.
Right.
And I think it's important to not base what you think authenticity is based on the feeling you get. Because I felt like I wanted to go, but my head was saying, dude, don't do it. Right? And I struggled not going because I wanted to go. So it's the day of the concert. My friends are gone. They're in Calgary, another province over. And I end up walking through a Indigenous exhibit. And there's this beautiful powwow music playing. And as I'm looking at this regalia that is on this model, this mannequin, there's a bunch of regalia. It's beautiful regalia. There's a little thing written there. And as I looked on the regalia, it had all these little squares. And it talked about each square resembled a challenge in the man's life. And as I looked at all of a sudden it was like there were squares everywhere on this thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I was in one of those. And then I had the insight, and I realized I'm in alignment.
Wow.
There was this deep experience that, okay, the wisdom of my now said don't go, but I had a feeling, but that feeling couldn't be trusted.
Yeah.
Right.
And when I went, I saw that I was in alignment. And so as the years would move on, and where I'm in a place today, there's an internal recognition that tells me if I'm in alignment, and it's a lot simpler. Like, there's not this real struggle as to know, like, is this in alignment or is it not in alignment? Like, I'm not really in my head about it. Does it involve me serving out of my capacity of, like, who I think Sundance is? Yeah. Okay, well, are we open that day? Yeah, we have some space on that day. Well, maybe we should do it. And then I'll find out about myself when I go and do it.
Right.
It senses, like, my sense pick up on the fact that it's aligned, and then I'll learn about myself and I'll think, well, yeah, we did it once, but that's about it. We're not doing that again, or I want to do that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So when you get super clear about who you are at your core, it's easier for you in your heart to know what aligns and doesn't align for you.
it seems like that, it seems like that. And I'm not trying to speak about this vaguely or in a way that is non-committal, but I've experienced so many different things with what I thought when I thought I've been authentic, or when I thought I've been aligned, and I missed it. I wasn't. I felt like I was,
Mm-hmm.
but it ended up being something altogether different. And
So you're saying that one of my heroes, Sundance Robson, is still discovering who he is for himself.
that's right.
Love that.
That's what makes this so fun. One of the sayings that I hear in ceremonies, or from the indigenous cultures, is that I walk in the mystery of life, or that I walk in the great mystery, Wankatanka, like the Great Spirit. And I think that the term walking in the mystery is so fitting, because life for me is very much like floating down a river, and it meanders. And I can see only so far. And for what's happening in my life this year, I can only see to certain points. But Sundance now needs to arrive at Sundance then. But that's a mystery.
Yeah.
That's a mystery. Now I have the opportunity to create from who it is that I think I need to be that person in September. But there becomes now the path of integration and this path of healing as I'm in relationship with that Sundance in September.
Yeah.
Because that Sundance in September is initiated in something that Sundance in June isn't.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so this becomes this path of integration, and I also heal things that need to be healed, and continue to move into greater alignment with the great mystery.
I love that. As I'm hearing this, it sounds to me like Sundance now looks to Sundance future to guide him. And we often talk about, like, if you could go back in time and talk to 21-year-old self, what would you tell 21-year-old self? And we're just taking that and flipping it around. What would future self say to present self?
Yeah. Absolutely. Is that a question?
Kind of ish. If you have something to say about it, I'd love to hear it.
Well, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I think when I'm wanting to manifest or create something in my life, like for instance, I've had tremendous opportunities to play at the Being Experience in Birmingham, and also the Being Experience in Arizona.
Yeah.
And that required me to be a certain type of Sundance even before that happened. Because I knew what it felt like to be on stage. Because I did that when I was younger. See, I didn't forget that. That was the gold that I was able to retrieve from all of that.
Right.
Some serious deep teachings about that. Like, first of all, it happens. So don't judge yourself, forgive yourself. And you remember what it was like being on stage then? Yeah. Do you remember how much you practiced and were a master of your craft for that cause then? Yeah. Well, imagine doing that and not coming from a place of lack, but coming from a place of wholeness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Embodying that energy that you have on stage. Do that now, and then in the future, you'll have that. And it became this own sort of self-coaching thing, because honestly, I can't get coaching from people on that, or at least I'm not around a coach that would coach me on that. Now, I work with really powerful coaches, but there's certain things at the end of the day when it comes down to me,
right,
I got to make the decision.
Right.
I've got to be committed to the craft in those moments of silence, of what it is that I'm choosing to do with my time.
Yeah.
And that's really where the embodiment piece comes in. One of the things that I see come up in this other word that comes with authenticity, alignment, is embodiment. Embodiment shows me that I'm already there. I'm embodied in my practice, to help add clarity to the statement. So when I'm already embodied in something that I know I'm going to take on in the future, if I build around that embodiment, manifesting it in the future will be simpler, because then it just becomes a matter of pulling it all into that place that I'm already embodied.
Wow. Embodied will be that now.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And so being that way, or who I was being in those moments, afforded me the opportunity to play on those stages.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, what you said about coaches, coaches are brilliant and they're great guides. But the coach isn't going to go in the game for you. It's your life, and you're the one responsible for your own life.
Yeah.
I liked also what I heard. I'm not sure I heard the word, but I experienced the experience of when you were in the exhibit and you were listening to the powwow music and you were looking at the regalia and you saw all the squares in front of you, as if each one of those squares was a challenge and it represented the challenges that a person would go through in their life. I heard gratitude for the challenges.
Yes. Yeah, the gratitude is like the water hitting the rocks in the river and becomes smooth over time.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
That gratitude is when it's so interesting how I continue to rely on the fundamental teachings I had earlier on in life, and I thought then that they were useless.
Wow.
So when I was struggling in addiction, or like after I got out of treatment, but I still found myself like wanting to use, and in between this, well, should I use or should I stay clean or should I use? A sponsor would say, why don't you go home and write a gratitude list? And I would think that's not what I'm going to do. But I would do it.
Right.
And pretty soon I had this long list of all of these things that I was grateful for.
Right.
And they were all true.
They're all true.
Right.
They weren't made up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did I have to sift a little bit to get over myself to actually write that I was grateful for some of these things? Yeah, I did. I'm grateful for the fact that I went through life, the first half, the way that it was. I am so grateful for the trials and the tribulations that occurred, because it only makes me more capable to be able to address what's happening in my life today or what might come down the line. Who knows? Life throws you all sorts of curves.
Yeah.
And I have a decision and a choice. This is the thing. That's the one thing that I'll always have. I think about the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. The one thing that they couldn't take away was the man's ability to choose.
Absolutely.
100.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. And choose every moment.
Yeah. So choosing to be grateful is powerful. Like, man, how grateful I am for this office. Like,
Beautiful.
I know I love it. Like, man, I've got access to the best books in the world. This is the greatest space. I'm talking to you two. Man, like, life is so good.
Yeah.
Life is so good, it's amazing when I think about what myself and my beloved partner like are creating in the world today. And I think that for me, when I started coaching, a part of me just wanted to find out more about myself.
Yeah.
And what I've seen now is how coaching really impacts the home. And I think that for me is I heard a quote that there's no success in the world that will ever make up for failure in the home. And I had the first part of my life, the family was broken.
Yeah.
And I've come to see that be restored. I've come to learn how to be in relationships. And, with me and Karen, it's amazing to see what the awareness does in our own lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. Creating that awareness opens you up to the opportunity to choose the moment before you. Without that awareness, you don't necessarily have what it takes to choose. I mean, you're choosing, but having awareness in the moment allows you to choose who who you're being and how you're being moving forward.
You're healing, you're showing up, healing yourself, expanding your edge, healing your family, coaching and healing individuals, healing nations, healing corporations, healing groups. One thing about your work that I find super fascinating is how you incorporate and use music in your work. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So for me, it comes from a ceremonial way of life. And right now, I'm actually currently once a week going out and sitting in a sweat lodge out in a field. And I'm sitting in there with elders, and it's hot. But what happens in that sweat lodge is we sing old traditional songs. And when you're in that sweat lodge and that tent flap closes, you could be at any point in history.
Right.
It's always been done like that. It's looked like that in that sweat lodge for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
The protocols are old. And the smell is the same thing when they throw cedar on the rocks. It's like that. But it gets so hot in that sweat lodge when they bring the rocks in. They call the rocks the grandfathers. Sometimes they bring them in 7 at a time, and they do 4 rounds, and at the end you have 28 rocks. Or they bring them in all at once, and they do one long round. Or sorry, they do 4 rounds, but everybody sort of stays in the sweat. And for me, when the sound and the songs start, I'm able to ground myself because it gets very hot, very uncomfortable. And I start thinking about that.
Yeah.
And that's like fuel to the fire. But when I start to sing and when I start to delve more deeply into the essence of ceremony in these moments of where I'm being tested almost through like fire, or it feels like this initiation I'm going through, when I use sound, it addresses what's going on somatically. And so for me, I saw that people were experiencing a fire in their lives that they're responding to that is less than the way that they want to respond. They might want to respond better. But the lust of that fire keeps buying them into anger or some type of wrathful behavior.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found with being in the sweat was that the fire in the sweat matched the heat inside of my body. And so when I sit with people, I'm able to address the heat and the fire that's going in their body with the ceremonial somatic sound.
Yeah.
And that helps for this integration.
Absolutely.
So you're being even outside of the sweat lodge, if you're leading a corporate group or you're leading a governmental group, same principles?
Absolutely. So to give you an example, when I was doing some of the work for Saskatchewan Justice, we did it on a really beautiful plot of land, and it was in a corporate building, and this corporate building was built on this Indigenous land. It's called Wanaskewin, and but I was there to tell them, and this is why they call it truth and reconciliation, is because we're talking about things that happen that are truthful, that are confirmed, and we're talking about that.
Yeah.
Right.
And and when we talk about forced assimilation and use things like that and intergenerational trauma, people start squirming.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is a corporate setting.
Right.
Like you've got in that room, there were lawyers, there were judges, there were boards of directors. And so,
Right.
And I can tell, I can tell when the eyes are looking at you or when they're going like this, right? And
Right.
or when they're starting to go like this. And so it's just visible.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, okay, they're feeling the heat. I don't need to turn it up more. I'll sing,
Right.
Because the song is like water.
Mm.
Now this is the element, right? And I think this is sort of the awareness and why I look at it through nature. You had Dr. Pettit on here just a while ago, and
Right.
Yes, we
so
did.
for me, the principles are also nature.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I experience when I'm sitting in the sweat, when they open the door between the rounds, is there's a little bit of wind that comes in. Man, I've never been so grateful for wind.
Right.
Right? And sometimes on the prairies in
Yeah.
May or June, there's a lot of wind coming through, and people are like, "Yeah, I just want to plant this flower bed, but there's just so much wind. This is not any
Yeah.
fun," right? But when that wind comes in the context of a sweat, you're like, "Give me some more, give me some more." Or when you hear the song, it acts as like a water. And so
Yeah.
in those corporate settings, the song acts as a water. The song acts as a wind. And so I'm never outside of remembering what I'm learning in ceremony. That's why I call it ceremonial somatics.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm taking that piece, that essence, that truth, and I'm meeting it. I'm meeting you with that, not even in any language, but I'm channeling a sound for you right now in this moment. This is the medicine in the moment.
Right.
Yes. Absolutely.
And there's this exchange going on.
Well, your being nature, you're giving me inspiration bumps just picturing this happening.
That's so cool. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, it's all there. When I opened up to the understanding of the three principles, for me, it was very profound. It was a very profound experience because I saw that we're always in our nature. We're never not in nature.
Yeah.
You know,
It's-
and
right.
it's important to remember that even though I'm in a structure, but there's nature right outside that window,
Yeah.
and there's laws that govern things in nature. If you learn how to work with them, you can create a pretty powerful life and empower people with that life.
Beautiful. Don't resist.
Yeah, there's another one right there.
Well, Corey, what do you think? I'm going to have to go back and listen to this several times because I'm just overwhelmed with the wisdom I've heard today.
Yeah. Sundance, you just have so much gold that you've provided today just in conversation. And I think it's really beautiful how, I mean, I just continue to resonate with this, the medicine in the moment, and, you know, being open to experiencing that, whatever that looks like for you, and however it takes to heal what you have going on for yourself. And, you know, part of that is just being open to be gratitude and have abundance, and to be in alignment, and to be authenticity, have authenticity with who we are. And man, there's so much to go on. We could spend hours talking about this. So yeah. And I think it would be interesting if you have a moment just to really, you talked about using sound, but talk about the relationship that people have with music, and how that is so powerful in healing.
It doesn't really involve a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
When I'm singing, or when people are caught up in the moment of a song or the moment of a sound, they're present.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking you were going to say, to be honest with you, because music just centers you to a presence and you experience it. Right. And yeah, I think people have a really strong relationship to that. And I think that I just love the way that you use sound and music in what you do in healing. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
It's interesting. Some of the greatest teachers that I've ever come across that have taught me about sound and music haven't, that I know of, been like musicians.
Yeah.
And when I first heard artists talk about TBOL like TNFL and do that whole talk, and I really heard what was being said in that, and about who you're being when you're doing a given task.
Yeah.
I saw for myself, like, dude, you're not pushing when you're singing. If you knew who you were there wouldn't be any doubt in the world about who you could be when you were singing if you push.
Yeah.
But since you don't know who you are, you won't. You're afraid. You're afraid to push because you're afraid someone might think something about it.
Right.
And I remember that moment where he brought Deuce Latouille into Amy's office and said, she will be doing this, this, or this. And he goes in there and she's working on her work, the scriptures or whatever she's working on. And he said, that's what commitment looks like. And I related that to my music.
Yeah.
Right. And that, for me, that's what sound is. Music is, there's something coming out of my being. It's springing forth.
Yeah.
And I got to get out of the way of that because it's coming. So don't hold it back.
Yeah.
Don't be cheap with what wants to work through you.
That's brilliant. Just because in medicine, and not just in medicine, we're here talking about being in medicine, but that happens every day in life for people, right? That constriction that they feel because of the ego or of the mind, of the judgment that they're concerned about, right? Rather than just opening up and being unrestricted and letting it flow through them and creating an environment that flows through them that really brings about healing to people in the moment. I mean, that was amazing what you just said.
Awesome. Well, in moments like that, this is when it happens.
Yeah.
Being able to facilitate conversations like this is a real gift. You know, I want to say one more thing that Sid Banks said that also helped me with music, and it was in relationship to the principles. And so it's like people were like, well, what am I looking for? You know, it was listen, go inside. You're looking for a feeling, give that away.
Yeah.
And it was so simple, right? I was just like, oh man, you know, don't get caught up in the words, catch the essence.
Yep.
Give that good essence feeling away. That's what you want to do.
Yeah. Radiate that energy out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Well, you definitely accomplished that mission today, Sundance.
Thank you very much.
You're great.
That was so good. I was actually nervous before I was on this call.
You know, Sundance.
I finally stopped sweating.
You're in a sweat lodge right now.
Yeah.
Yes,
You could sing, you could sing and center yourself there. Right.
Right.
I just want to acknowledge you really for, we started out this conversation about the story, right? This intergenerational story. And I just want to acknowledge you for being just an amazing storyteller. You're fantastic at it. And so thank you for sharing all of those stories with us today, because I learned a great deal from you.
Oh, I really appreciate that, man. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, Sundance. Likewise, I want to acknowledge you for stepping into your divinity and your greatness and letting it flow through you today. It served me, and I'm sure it's going to serve our listeners. So thank you so much.
Dr. Mars, Dr. Anderson, I'm calling you guys doctor because I also appreciate the work that you put into your practice. And I want to acknowledge you both as doctors and as physicians that are doing something pivotal in this world. So thank you for the work you're doing and who you're being.
Fully received. Thank you.
Thank you, Sundance. Thanks for being on. It was great to be with you. And one last final thought is we talked about getting to the edge and then expanding. And I just want to thank you for that, because this conversation definitely helped that for me. So thank you.
Amazing.
Thanks, Sundance. Thank you for joining us today on the Being in Medicine show, where each week we open the transformative power of connecting our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual nature to how we show up in medicine.
If you find this conversation valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you or someone you know has a story to share, contact us at beinginmedicine.com. See you next time.